Hey everyone, wonderful to be here and have our panelists. I'm Ariel Wolf. I'm an attorney in Washington, D.C., but I have another job. Just came from the White House. I dress as the Easter Bunny. On the, so interesting moment on the balcony there, but it is good to, we got to laugh coming out of D.C., guys. I'm sorry.
And from the lawyer.
That's right. That's right. It is good to get out of the swamp for a bit. Let me introduce our wonderful set of panelists here, and we're going to have a good conversation around regulation and policy and insurance and how it all fits together. Start with Jeff Farrah. Jeff, I'll do this off the top of my head, is the CEO of the Autonomous Vehicle Industry Association, the nation's leading organization that represents the autonomous vehicle industry, from light duty, medium duty, heavy duty, and everything in between in policy and regulation at the state and federal levels. Jeff has been with the organization and has led it for 3.5, almost 4 years now, and has done a great job in growing that. Previous to that, Jeff, you were general counsel of the National Venture Capital Association. Jillian Slyfield is Aon's Global Chief Innovation Officer. You lead Aon's digital economy team, which is, as you noted to me, a purpose-built AV brokering and risk consulting team with experts focused on accelerating the growth of AV clients. And is that purpose-built? Is that a deliberate use of the term for AVs? Okay, I want to make sure. Okay, good. And Lando Juarez is the head of legal for autonomous mobility and delivery at Uber and a member of the company's AV leadership team. Lando partners with many of the folks in this room to build the industry partnerships, regulatory pathways, and operational capabilities necessary to commercialize AVs at global scale. And he has led teams for several of Uber's biggest growth bets in his time there. And previous to that, decades of legal experience, including for wide-ranging product development and safety initiatives at GM, and has had the pleasure of working with Lando for some time. So thank you so much all for being here, and I look forward to having this important conversation. I want to start with some perspectives where each of you come from in this important area. And Jeff, I'll start with you. And really, this is about how much has been happening at the federal and state level this year. So, of course, AVIA has been at the forefront of these discussions, and in many respects, the battles that we've been seeing. You testified before the Senate Commerce Committee just 6 weeks ago, 2 months ago, and AVIA staff have been around the country. So give us a sense, or what can you tell us about the 2026 legislative sessions and the regulatory changes that are happening now and how this affects the AV ecosystem?
I'd be glad to. Thanks very much, first of all, to the organizers of Ride AI. This is a really great conference, and Ariel, thank you for moderating it. I'll say when we look out at the landscape of federal and state issues, this is a time of great promise for the autonomous vehicle industry, but also one of great peril. And at the federal level, I think we have a number of really fantastic opportunities right now. Obviously, with Secretary Duffy, this has been someone who is very motivated to help to put in place a federal policy framework when it comes to autonomous vehicles. He has outstanding leadership at some of the sub-agencies within NHTSA and FMCSA, and there's a number of rulemakings and other types of articulations of agency policy that are ongoing that we're really excited about. And then up on Capitol Hill, we're now in a year where Congress needs to reauthorize the so-called surface transportation bill. People used to refer to it as the highway bill. And so this is seen as a really great opportunity for us to be able to attach autonomous vehicle legislation to that. And so there's a few different proposals in the House. We're working on a new one in the Senate. And these are seen as real ways in which we can effectively put in place new statute, new law when it comes to autonomous vehicles to really answer some of the federal questions around vehicle design, vehicle construction, and vehicle performance. So those are all great things. We're putting a tremendous amount of resources behind trying to make sure that we are taking those opportunities. At the same time, though, the states have been very, very active when it comes to autonomous vehicle deployment laws. And a lot of that is very good news. You now have 26 states that have AV deployment laws. That accounts for about 58% of the US population. So that's a positive trend. We are trying to pass new AV deployment laws progressively, and that's something that we're very fortunate to lead that work. But at the same time, at the state level, you have a lot of very anti-AV legislation attitudes that are out there, and we have a lot of defense that we have to do, and that's really a lot of the peril that I mentioned at the outset. I'll just give a quick data point here, which is that in just the last 3 years, there have been 51 pieces of legislation introduced in a variety of states to require a human operator be present in an autonomous vehicle. don't have to explain to people in this room why that would be so detrimental to the growth of the industry. This is one where these get introduced in red states, blue states, everything in between. And I'm very happy to say that we have defeated every single one of them. So they've all been defeated, but they keep on coming, and this attitude keeps on coming. And so final thing I'll just say is this is why it's so important for the industry to remain unified, make sure that we are getting out and explaining the promise of the technology, but also what the growth trajectory looks like.
No, it's a really good summary of what's going on, and I think we find ourselves in the middle of this space trying to defend and anticipate from different angles. Jillian, I want to kind of turn to you to build upon that, but really in an adjacent way. So Jeff laid out the AV deployment needs a permissive regulatory framework, and that's really important. But it also needs an insurance market that allows companies to safely innovate and allocate risk. And that's something that you've been at the forefront of and been involved in for some time. Can you talk to us about that work and what you've been doing in that space to try and accelerate things in that dimension?
Yeah, thank you. The insurance community is very excited about autonomous vehicles, in part because auto at large, kind of auto liability, has been a loss leader for many carriers for a long time. It's not an area of coverage that is profitable for most insurance companies in particular, and they see this as an opportunity to drive costs down and create a profitable line of business for themselves. And contrary to popular belief, we do see ourselves as an innovative industry. And I say this all the time, capital won't go where it can't be protected. So we need to have protections in place in order for the investments to be made. We don't struggle at all having insurance carrier participation on programs for our autonomous vehicle companies. And whether that's the driver, the OEM, fleet operators, platform companies, the capacity is there. So the carriers want to participate. I do expect that that may get challenged as things progress, because many of us are still in pilots. We're talking about hundreds, maybe thousands of vehicles, not tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands. So as the exposure rises, there'll be some challenges. But the two big issues, I think, are getting carriers comfortable with what good looks like. And some of that can be helped by regulatory, which is what is the safety standard and how are we measuring that, so that a carrier can say, I've seen 3 companies, this one's good, this one's okay, and this one maybe isn't up to my standard. That's part of underwriting, is understanding that piece of it. And then you also referenced liability allocation. So I think all of us in this room can understand when a claim were to happen, and they will happen, how do we want to allocate that risk? Is it auto liability, products liability? When do we need to think about a cyber coverage coming into play, general liability? How do these 4 pieces fit together? Now, some of that we can say, let's model that, as we are doing now, after what's already in place for human-driven vehicles. There's no reason to change what's already working. But putting limits and standards in place will be essential for the industry to pull some friction out of the process today.
Yeah, and that's a super helpful background. I know for me, in an overview, you mentioned you underscored liability. We'll come back to that, because that's something that has been a big topic at the legislative and regulatory, really legislative level. But Lando, kind of teeing off on both of those aspects. So you're sitting in a place at Uber looking to operationalize and commercialize AV deployment at scale. And so you need a workable regulatory framework, and you need an insurance market. Those are kind of 2 foundational elements of what you need. So talk to us. Now you got to operationalize that with, let's say, fair to say, an imperfect regulatory framework and maybe a not fully mature insurance market, at least not from the perspective of it's not out there yet. So how are you putting that into practice, given that, and sort of growing alongside those 2 foundations?
Yeah, so we operate in 70 countries and over 15,000 cities. So it's a really complex system of transportation that we've understood how to operate in for some time. Of course, insurance plays a big role. The regs play a big role every place that we operate. Jeff, you identified some places where the federal regulations have gaps here in the US, but we have to be able to speak that language every place that we operate. But of course, the US is a ground zero market for all of us, and a proof point for so many people in this room and in the industry. So we have to think about the ways that we can close those gaps, either through structural partnership kind of elements that we have in our commercial partnerships. Of course, insurance and liability plays a big way in which we will structure those commercial agreements too. But if you're thinking about regs, You were mentioning, Jillian, you were talking about kind of stripping cost and inefficiency out of markets on the insurance side. We think about regs the same way. What do the regs do for the players in this room and in the ecosystem? They give consumers confidence that something is measured, trustworthy. They're a cornerstone of adoption. When something's regulated, you at least have a marker to understand that your government or your regulator has thought about it. It also gives people who are builders, whether you're engineers, validation teams, or your safety teams, it gives you something to mark against. And I guess really simply put, regulatory clarity eliminates tech debt. So that's a lovely thing for people who are builders, right, to eliminate that tech debt. The same thing is true for insurance. I think if we can have either single issuer or common understanding or commonly underwritten policies that they can arbitrate amongst commercial agreements or arbitrate amongst common insurance understanding kind of in the ecosystem, we can eliminate the friction of claims management, claims administration, and all of those things. And your industry will be part of solving so many of those challenges for us, so thank you. But in the absence of having regulation that tells us exactly how to do those things, either attributes liability to certain parties in certain instances, or tells us exactly how a purpose-built vehicle or standard vehicles can be regulated at the federal level or operationalized at the state level, we have to plug those gaps with our commercial agreements. And that's where we do things like publish our safety standards and the guidelines that we expect to hold our operating partners to when they operate on our platform. We have bar-raising conversations with them about what it means to commonize or normalize safety discussions, safety taxonomies, transparency, and then we talk about incidents. As a platform that operates at scale globally, we've had to address all of the challenging things that occur when you operate a transportation platform at scale. So if we're talking about risk and operations, some of the things that we've had to manage and have hard discussions as a leader in the transportation space, we've had to talk about everything from assaults to incidents to incident response and normalized discussion and measurement and continuous improvement of that space. And that's one of the places that Uber can lead in the AV space as well, is help to normalize discussion about continuous improvement and transparency about what robotaxis can and cannot do, in the same way that we've had to have those same hard discussions about what humans do.
So then let's go a little deeper on that. That's helpful to understand from your perspective. Start with you, Lando, but then I want to hear from everyone briefly. What is, from your perspective, collectively, the biggest hurdle about what is needed to scale deployment today? Right? We know we can get vehicles. I'm sure many of us took a vehicle, an AV here today, thanks to the code, by the way. That was very nice. But what's the primary bottleneck? Is it regulation? Is it insurability? Is it operational readiness, which you touched on, right? You need to be able to actually do it, right? It's great to have a framework and be able to insure, but you need to be ready to do it. So just briefly, like what would you say is that primary bottleneck? See if we can get some consensus or not.
Well, maybe one benefit of being the 2:30 panel today is we're joining the conversation mid-chapter. And so I think the panel that went before us, maybe two Pecha Kuchas before us. I think David, Jewel, and Chris all did a really nice job of talking about some of those operational readiness elements and the structural elements, both at the vehicle level and at the in-field operations level that it takes to go to market. So I think the hurdles, each one of those things is a hurdle. Operational readiness is probably the next frontier.
Okay.
If you've heard both Alex and you heard Chris and any of the builders who were on stage today, know that autonomy, has not been solved. The process to solve autonomy has been solved, and that is a time, it's compute, and it's an architecture, kind of solution for kind of putting on board really capable software and then integrating it into a really capable vehicle. That component of the work is on a path to being solved.
So operational readiness would be
that's the next frontier. And operational readiness is not just the footprint of depots or charging or power, all of which have real lead timelines, but it's also things like remote assist, remote operations, proving that operations at scale can be safe. Running that 20, 30, 50, even low hundreds of cars operation in a city is not the same as operating many tens of thousands of vehicles or hundreds of thousands of vehicles globally. And really stressing your systems out, stressing your support systems, stressing your hardware architectures, and understanding those kinds of failures at the service level. is really it's the next frontier for the robotaxi industry. And then maybe in addition, because we're spending time talking about robotaxi, just in the personally owned vehicle space, the same is true. And probably wasn't something that we talked about during some of our earlier discussions. But as I've listened to the content that's been on stage today, a lot of the content has been about robotaxi readiness, but the potential for human or for consumer-owned vehicles and L4 operation in human-owned vehicles. Or consumer-owned vehicles is a real challenge, and putting the L4 tech into the vehicle is not where its challenge ends.
Right, we'll get to the personal vehicle and trucking too.
Yeah.
But I'm curious, go to Jeff, what's your sense? I mean, regulation, is it insurance, is it operational readiness, as Lando's saying? What's your basic sense?
At AVIA, every May we come out with a report called State of AV, and it'll come out again this coming May. And one of the things we do is we survey the member CEOs of AVIA and ask them about the things that they're concerned about. And over again, and I'll kind of preview a little bit, I think, what the findings are going to be for this May. Over and over again, the policy landscape continues to be a driving concern of a lot of CEOs of AV companies. And it's kind of headwinds and tailwinds, right? How do we get a federal policy framework in place that answers questions around vehicle design, right? Like, can you remove certain manual controls? Can you make vehicles look fundamentally different than they look for human-driven vehicles? Vehicle performance. How do we know when an AV is safe enough? How is it that we can make sure that the public and regulators understand that when an AV is on the road, it's meeting certain minimum performance standards that the industry supports and wants to move forward? And then at the same time, it's the headwinds issue. It's, as I said before, it's this idea of what happens in a situation where a bill sneaks through that ultimately bars AVs from a given state. How do you deal with a situation like that? And so, again, it's something where there are opportunities out there, but we need to all acknowledge and take seriously that there could be downside as well.
Mm-hmm. So Jillian, we haven't heard either of these two gentlemen mention insurance as the primary barrier. I think it's a testament to the work you're doing. What would be your answer to the primary bottleneck for AV deployment at scale?
Yeah, I would agree. It's not insurance. I do think that we can't, especially for like me and the people that I work with at Aon, kind of rest on our laurels on that, because carriers are very interested in pilot programs, kind of small batch AV, if you will, because everyone wants to learn. That does not mean everyone who's comfortable with 100 vehicles is also comfortable with 50,000 vehicles. That's a different ask of them. That's a different commitment of capital. And so I think, one of the things that we have committed a considerable amount of time, it's about 20% of our total team's time globally, is spent on getting carriers prepared, teaching them how to underwrite, teaching them what good looks like, giving them access to our clients, meaning, we have product people from our clients. We have the mapping people. They come out to days like today and they touch and feel the vehicles. They take rides in it. It's like, let's demystify this. A carrier is not, you're not going to have an underwriter step up to the table who's never taken a ride successfully in an AV. It's not going to happen. So we've got to get the right people in the room. Because I don't think it's a barrier today, but I could absolutely see where it could be if we're not smart and thoughtful on building that roadmap alongside them and bringing them in as part of the conversation around data, safety, et cetera. What I hear from our clients today is, yes, it's regulation, and I would say these are both, right? It's regulation, but it's also infrastructure. How do we build a go-to-market plan? I think it was Chris Urmson maybe earlier who said, like, we've kind of got the technology done, right? You're still refining, but now we've got to build a business model that works. And so how do we do that effectively? And scaling the pilots is not the answer.
I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, you're talking, I think, about educational readiness. And so making sure that the right audiences that need to be educated about AVs do that. And I think the underwriters is one bucket of and then there's sort of the public and maybe policymakers. Is that sort of in essence what you've been involved in?
Yes.
Yeah. So I want to turn on the policy side. Maybe we'll go with an example of what we're seeing and get some reactions here. So let's take Texas. It's becoming an important state, certainly for all of the different deployment models and classes of vehicles. And one thing that we saw was in Texas, there was a bill in place, AV law in place for a number of years. And then as the rubber met the road, so to speak, the policymakers wanted to modify that and adjust it and grow it with as AVs started to scale. So I guess as AV's deployment rolls out this year, and there's new legislation, Jeff, you were talking about, maybe the flip side of this, like what's the biggest risk from a policy standpoint, from each of your perspectives in terms of chilling the insurance market or slowing deployment or creating other kinds of issues as other states now move to say, oh, we got to update our law, we got to do it. So I don't know, Jeff, you want to start with that?
Yeah, I mean, Texas is, to me, the quintessential example of how really smart policy has driven investment dollars, it's driven technology innovation in the state, and it's driven employment among Texans. And so you go to Texas, and it's just incredible from a regulatory perspective, the various agencies that are involved, and some of those agencies have shifted a little bit with the reform bill that you're mentioning, Ariel. But there's really this embrace of autonomous vehicles, and this is something that has really been felt by the industry, and the state is really getting the benefits of that. And so, I wish that more states were following that lead. Some are, which is a great thing. Others seem to be learning the opposite lesson for whatever reason. And so I think that this is something where, oftentimes we need to have that shining example of like, okay, there are consequences to writing bad policy. Texas has learned the example of how is it we're going to draw in more dollars and make sure that we are a regional and ultimately national hub for AVs.
Lando, so from your perspective, what is the biggest risk of something that could go wrong in a legislation? Besides, I mean, we'll take out of the equation banning AVs or something like that, but like what component of these updates, as Jeff was referring to, is
maybe two things. Okay. One would just be missing the mark on the style and the way that a multi-partner ecosystem will go to market. So when the CPUC wrote its laws originally, or DMV in California, they thought about a fully vertically integrated entity that would be both the manufacturer and the installer of the ADS and essentially the operator of its own fleet, a vertically integrated system. If you want to introduce capital innovation into the market, you need to make sure you have fleet operators that are in vision and regulation, multiple other parties who may be either a permit holder or at least an operator that's comprehended by the regulation. So you don't want to eliminate the opportunity for additional actors to participate just through bad legislation or rulemaking. And then maybe the other one would just simply be missing the mark on the core policy components of what structurally changing the way that people move is going to be changed by robotaxis. So just making sure that you're not contemplating a system that just operates in dense urban areas, only serves one component of the population, doesn't have an expansive ODD that thinks about transportation equity and those kinds of things. So true policy should consider that when L4 plus technology is ready and helping people move around the world, that it's actually delivering on that purpose of safer, more affordable, more accessible transportation, and not leaving those questions unanswered. So in other words, not permissibility for permissibility's sake, but truly taking a structural policy approach to making transportation better.
That's great, and we're short on time. Jillian, I want to, in a sense, give you the last word unless others want to jump in after that. We're entering the era of purpose-built vehicles, going back to the name of your team, purpose-built. Purpose-built vehicles, novel design, that whole category. So from your perspective, does that introduce a new variable that makes it harder? Does it make it easier? Does it sort of just approach it the same way? How do you think about, now we're seeing these vehicles start to get approved, or at least on the cusp of approval?
Harder or easier from an insurance perspective?
Sure.
I think it's a little bit harder. Here's the good news. I really don't think we need any new insurance products. I think we can use the products we have and just deploy them in different ways. So we can take that off the table. There's nothing we can't solve for so far. But it does create a lot of complexity. So we have people that come to us and say, do you write autonomous vehicles? I don't know. The answer is yes, but are you the software? To your point, some are vertically integrated, but are you the platform provider? Are you the software? Who are you in the ecosystem? And that complexity, when I'm sure many of you in the audience and certainly our clients play different roles with different contracts. So at some points, they are working with different driving software in their OEMs, as an example, and making sure that we create insurance programs that take all of those different complexities into consideration so that there aren't holes in coverage at some point. I am a strong advocate for bespoke solutions in the space for that reason, because I think every one of the clients that we have, and we have many, they all have a unique insurance program for them. I haven't seen a one-size-fits-all. And that's great, like that's fine, right? There's no problem with that. So I think as long as we continue to be creative and thoughtful in the way that we apply the coverage, we should have no challenges there.
It's helpful. All of it speaks to a promising coming months and years. I think there's a lot of excitement about it. So we ran out of time, but I appreciate everyone here. Thank you very much, everyone, for your time. Thanks.